Mr. Niranjan will engage with Mr. Vaidya for a fireside chat to understand the challenges and trends in the sector from the manufacturing perspective. Over to you, Mr. Niranjan.
Audio card, holding that on live. Sir,
Yes.
please close your video. Nicha?
Samir, are you able to see Mr. Vaidya's video? I am getting now. I'm
Okay. Okay, stand by, sir. Okay, stand by. Your video live, audio live, go.
Good afternoon and welcome back. Good afternoon, Mr. Vaidya.
Good afternoon to you, Niranjan.
It's an honor to have you with us today. It's not often that we get to interact with an industry veteran like you, and that too from this niche industry. Mr. Vaidya, my first question to you is about the evolution of this industry. If you look at the last one decade, there has been a kind of a growth spur if you consider our industry. With a lot of policy changes and the involvement of a lot of players, whether it is Indian players or international players. So how would you analyze the current scenario of the aerospace and defense industry with regards to the Atmanirbhar policy particularly?
Yeah, so I think Niranjan, before coming to Atmanirbhar, we must analyze as to how the evolution of ISRO, DRDO and the industry has really taken place. And you will see that right from 1960s, every 10 years, 15 years, the government as well as the industry is taking a new and some out-of-box decisions. And first, I think phase was a learning phase. And then the scientists, they got together, formed ISRO, DRDOs and all that. Later on, as they found that their research is now getting matured, they started inviting industries. And then industry started learning, and then that learning phase probably got over in late 90s. And then we really started putting up infrastructure to ramp up the production, right from R&D, not only at the scientist level, but I think R&D at the production level also, because it was a new field as a overall India, and the industries were not tuned to it. Take example of Godrej from where I am coming. And we were traditionally known right from 1897 into the consumer product, which are one of easiest products to do it as far as the technical specifications are concerned. It has its own challenges into marketing and distribution and then sales and networking. But as far as the technology development and meeting those stringent environmental conditions, I think it is one of the easiest. So from there we have made a transition, and so did the industry as India has done it. And then in 2006 onwards, when the government started thinking of incorporating offsets into the defense procurement, and then 2006 onwards, the DPP 2006, a very famous DPP which brought 30% offsets, most of us, we started taking it little seriously, because earlier, even though we were involved into R&D projects with ISRO and DRDO, numbers were not sufficient. We were doing hardly few numbers. One of the engines, like we are masters in liquid engines for Indian space program, but we are making one engine in 3 years or 4 years, and that's not the volume what industry was looking for. The kind of investments, the gestation period, the kind of training qualifications which are required in this area. Once you invest into all these things, then getting one engine in 3 years is not the right volume what you are really expecting it. So 2006 onwards, we started getting exposed to the international OEMs where the private offsets were allowed. And that really brought in a phenomenal change in the industry, the way we were thinking and looking at this. Because in the India, when we were doing it at the R&D time, I don't think government was negotiating that hard or really asking us to meet the competitive pricing. It's only when we got opportunity to work in 2006. So I think not only quality and delivery, but the cost aspect also started coming in 2006. And that set in really a good amount of thinking at the industry level to find out how the QCD, all the three important elements of any customer will be able to meet it. And now it's a fantastic time. You asked me about the Atmanirbhar. I think there is no better time than today, when we have more than 100 articles which are banned and to be sourced from India. We have 108 technology access to DRDO. ISRO is coming out with their own similar, I think the opening up of the space programs, what is coming up, the two of the industries which they have set up in space and other industry which is there. So I think this is all a fantastic time. At the same time, I think what we have also seen is that there is geopolitical pressures also which are coming up. So it is not only the Atmanirbhar, but the geopolitical pressures, and especially after the COVID, when we have seen that there is a lot of rethinking of all the OEMs, especially from Europe and from the US. So mixed together, I think this industry is well poised for almost a vertical growth now at this stage.
Okay. Mr. Vaidya, you still there with us?
Yes, I'm
Yeah.
there, of course.
Mr. Vaidya, if you look at the Atmanirbhar Bharat campaign closely, I see there are three key aspects to it. One is obviously building capacities with regards to import substitution. Number two, sustaining the domestic demand, and number three, evolving or further developing the export side of it. So, how is it that companies like Godrej are working in these particular three things?
Yeah, so I mean, taking this particular clue that the government is now coming up and opening up all these kind of areas to a private industry equally well, that of ISRO and DRDO, and almost like a level playing field is being created between PSUs and the private industries. I think 2-3 important decisions we took in Godrej, and we have started implementing it. One is that, say, as we started building, those technologies in 80s and 90s are no more valid today. So first we invested into the latest generation technologies, machines, infrastructures, and got ourselves update to the technology platforms, understanding of the newer materials which have come into the market, so the metallurgy and their way of working, forming, machining, and how to really treat those materials well in our fabrication shops. Third is, I think there is a need for going into the larger numbers. So we started looking for low cost automations, and we started investing into the robots and other low cost automation techniques which are being used. Third, I think to make the competitiveness, we started investing into IoTs and digitization, because this industry really demands quite a large amount of documentation, and every document has to be preserved over next 15 to 20 years minimum. So it is not only documenting it, but preserving and retrieving at the right time when it is going to be required. So these three areas, and we have then started looking into the center of excellence. So recently we invested into beautiful infrastructure, a facility, and co-developed along with Rolls-Royce a special center of excellence for development of brackets for all the engines. Every engine has more than 300 brackets in various materials, right from very high temperature serviceability to very low temperature serviceability. And these brackets actually are going to take care of all the vibrations and damping them, so that the engine vibrations will not go onto the aircraft. So these brackets play a very critical role as a transition between the main aircraft where the passengers are going to sit and the engine which is going to propel it. So these steps are going to take us into the new phase of our expansion and new phase of these opportunities which are coming up.
Okay, if we look at the defense and aerospace ecosystem in our country, while we have the large players, the PSUs that you mentioned, the ISROs, the DRDOs, the HALs and BrahMos, and we have the large big players like the Godrej and the Tatas and the L&Ts and the Mahindras.
Mhm.
But at the same time, we also have a lot of small and medium enterprises. So, do you think the overall system, when you look at the small and medium enterprises, it is robust enough, number one, to look at the kind of growth that is envisioned in Atmanirbhar Bharat, and to deal with the disruption that can come anytime, whether it is the economic slowdown or whether it is COVID-19 pandemic?
Yeah, so two major decisions we took it. One is that first is that in the core manufacturing, which is component level manufacturing and its initial treatment. So that we are trying to farm out to extent possible. And we are encouraging all MSMEs to really take as much of our load into it so that we will get sufficient time to really concentrate onto the more value added integrated parts which are subsystems or full systems. Like we started doing components for Indian space programs. Today we build the entire liquid engine, whether it is for PSLV or for GSLV or for GSLV Mark III. Similarly for the defense systems, we make a very complex BrahMos stages, ready to use stages, and it has more than 40,000 different components which are integrated, and our final deliverable is only one article. So when these 40,000 components are integrated, then it becomes an article which is good for BrahMos to actually integrate into a final missile. So we have scaled up ourselves from a component supplier to an integrated state supplier. And to do that, first step is really to farm out as much as is possible. But when we farm out, we took two important decisions. One is that every component before we farm out to our partners, we actually produce it in-house. We have all types of machinery infrastructure and understand that component fully well, and then support our partnering company in the small and medium with all the necessary technical data so that it becomes easy for him. He doesn't really take a longer time in spending his time in developing that part. So he gets most of it ready for him to really. He has to only adapt from our machine to his machine and from our way of inspection to his way of inspection. The second important part is that we are trying to integrate all these our partners into a Godrej Aerospace cluster. So a supply chain which was missing in India, an ecosystem which was missing in India, we didn't have a tierized system. So now we have, we as a prime contractors, we are giving it to our tier 1 suppliers, who in turn give it to tier 2 suppliers and tier 3 suppliers. So for us, instead of placing 40,000 orders, it has become only 40 orders which we actually look after and really execute. Then these 40 companies, they actually distribute their orders to another 100 organizations, and it gets like a supply chain, what we see in any product or with any OEM. So that is the first decision. Second, when we have started saving our capex from putting it into the machines, we have heavily invested into the test facilities. So we have now all kinds of qualification facilities and all kinds of, you name it, and every surface treatment, every heat treatment, every non-destructive testing, every destructive testing, including all types of labs which are essential for our manufacturing, have been invested, and we got them qualified to the international standards. So now we don't have to send any component or any part for testing outside India. Everything is happen within our campus. So it's a one single integrated facility which has been created. And these two changes what we brought in the last 5 years, it has helped us a lot to really take up many major challenges, not only within India but from our global customers also.
I think this is a wonderful initiative that your group has started. This will definitely provide a boost to the ecosystem in the country. My second question is kind of related to that question. When it comes to manufacturing of defense and aerospace, it requires a different kind of specialization and expertise. That kind of specialization and expertise is not taught in our engineering colleges as of now, at least. So skill development is definitely a big pillar as far as this industry is concerned. So what is it that the industry needs to do on this front, and what is it that Godrej is already doing?
Yeah, so as you rightly said, I mean, this industry requires a very large level of qualifications and approvals, and it is not only for a product and the facilities, but it is also for the personnel. And every person who is engaged into it, he has to get attested to a particular way of working, and that requires a particular culture to really imbibed into each and every operator or each and every supervisor or engineer or every member of our organization to get involved into it. So what we did is we started our own training and qualification center along with all this what I said for the manufacturing. This is a second unit which we are running it, and we have a separate training center, and we have 4 streams in that, and all those 4 streams are been recognized by our customers for the fulfillment of the necessary requirement. Second is we also started working with ITIs. I mean, these ITIs, they were using very old syllabus. I mean, those syllabus were not even good for the regular production. Forget about the aerospace and defense, which has different kinds of materials and the tolerances are going to be different. So we started taking efforts and we started training their teachers to understand what is this aerospace materials, defense materials, what kind of a norm standards are required to be followed. And every year we started giving training to minimum 200 ITS students at our facilities. So it is not only for Godrej. I mean, we will of course pick up who are the bright ones among them because we are getting them trained in our facilities. But I think rest of them also are going to be good for all the other our supplying partners. So in this ecosystem of our 30 or 40 the Godrej Aerospace Cluster partners, we are making this kind of a skill set available with us as well as with them by having this training center. And we are encouraging more and more ITS to really come forward and try to emulate what we have done with these 3 ITS and take it further, so that the skill development, even the national skill development also, we have our own training manager who participates in this and has really participated and contributed a lot.
Okay, when it comes to this very critical sector, the government continues to play a very important role.
Yes.
So, do you think the current policy framework that we have for this structure, even after the new DPPP, do you think it is conducive enough for the growth of the industry, and does it really support the Atmanirbhar cause?
I will not really look into what government has to do it. I mean, I will take it that from 2006, government has been trying to do whatever best they can do it. I think now it is the turn for the industry to really respond to it. We can keep on asking, dil mange more. I mean, if we are getting something, we are asked for something more, and that is going to continue. And there is a need also. I am not saying that there is no need for government to contribute something more. But at this stage, what is required has been really given. So we need to really integrate our own ideas now, crystallize what we will be able to do it with what has been offered to us, and then we can ask for more. So I think what we are trying to do is that everyone cannot become Airbus and Boeing, and everyone cannot become the GEs of this world. So every industry has to really decide, and that has to be crystallized. And few industries we should really say that yes, you are going to be the ultimate OEMs who are going to supply to the armed forces or directly to the space. There are certain other industries who are going to become good tier 1 suppliers to you, because otherwise we cannot create a gap between the OEMs and the other industries. So everybody has to really come in, and that tier system, if we can develop it, and then in various forums, whether it is CII, ASSOCHAM, FICCI, wherever we are getting an opportunity, we are trying to encourage industries not to really become tier 1. Everybody cannot become tier 1. It cannot be a top heavy structure. It has to be a distributed structure by which we will be able to do it. Second, I think what is important is there is a good merit in public-private partnership. So we have a fantastic infrastructure, whether it is HAL, BEL, BDL, ECIL, I mean, all these companies, they have a fantastic infrastructure. Government is ready to invest as a GOCO concept, government-owned, company-operated. Now, how all these investments, what has been done so far by government, we will be able to run it efficiently. So that is, I think, the first task what we should take it up, and the public-private partnership has to really get strengthened. So we are offering our services. We are now ready to take up. All these days we were little reluctant to really operate under the government-owned, company-operated model. But now we have found a way out as to how we will be able to do it within this, the parameters which are there. Of course, as I said, more we can ask. I mean, there are a lot of things which are really a burden in this GOCO concept, which can be made easier. But first, we have to take a step ahead, and I am sure government will then really give the relaxation. The third area, I think, what we should really do is that we have been only looking academia as institutions which are going to produce engineers, and probably some of them will go abroad, some of them will remain here. And within all the rest available, we will be able to manage our own manufacturing, because manufacturing is the least attracted as far as the engineering is concerned today. But if we can really help startups, like we have taken the medium and small industries, there are many IITs, there are many NITs which are now encouraging to create a startup ecosystem, but they lack into some kind of experience, or they lack into getting their ideas converted into some kind of models or prototypes so that it can be tested. So we help them in getting their ideas converted at a very nominal cost. So we are not really bothering them much onto their financial systems, which is already strained as a startup. So that is the third area. So now we are taking this academia interaction, and unless and until the industry academia comes out with a risk as well as profit sharing model, I mean, when they are going to really do a research, the professor should not be only limited to only that kind of a research or that kind of a task, but he should be really looking that I will charge you only a small amount of money. Maybe his interest is in getting 1 or 2 PhDs sponsored for that, but it should not be limited only to developing more technical papers and more PhDs. It should get converted finally into a product. If Atmanirbhar has to be a successful, I don't think Atmanirbhar we can do success by making components, but we can do Atmanirbhar successful only if we make our own products, if we make our own standards, if we make our own IP, and we take charge of servicing them. And while doing that, we should not forget about quality. I mean, that's the another area which we have focused very largely, the fourth area. And the fifth, as I said, how to really become competitive. While doing everything, all this, if our costs are going to be higher, why should government buy from us? They will be tempted to buy what is available. And we have seen very dirty game. I'm sorry to use this word, but whenever we are ready with a particular product, all these foreigners, OEMs, they drop down their prices just to kill our initiatives. So that is the time where we should really get a support from government that, okay, we will be able to give you this, whatever money you are asking, but over next 3 years or 5 years, you should come down to the international pricing. So that's why this competitiveness plays a very important role.
I think that is a very pertinent point about the way international players play their role in this whole system. The government has recently kind of enhanced the negative list of import items. Do you think steps like that will further help the cause of Atmanirbhar Bharat?
Yeah, that's unfortunate that we couldn't really convert into many of our research into a product, and we have to take this kind of a step where we have to ban. I think after working for 40-50 years with ISRO and DRDO, if we have to take this step, it's a kind of a shame on us. But it's okay. I mean, someday or other we'll have to take that kind of a blunt, and we have taken it. But now at least we should really honor and respect what has been banned. And it should not be treated like, okay, I mean, India is trying to protect themselves, and then when we want the other items, we'll be having some kind of trade-offs to be done. That, okay, if you want a higher end system than this, what you have banned today, that also some of it has to be released. So that kind of a trade-off should not come. So now we have taken a decision. It's now our responsibility that all those 101 items, we should be able to produce it in India, and we should produce it to the international quality and international cost. So if we do that, then I think we'll be able to really stand to this reputation and go further. Otherwise, we'll be falling back on our own face if we don't make this successful.
Mr. Vaidya, the discussion with you has been so lucid that I have actually lost the track of time, and my team members have told me that we have only 2 minutes left. But nevertheless, I have a very important question from one of the audiences which I'll share with you, and it is related to pure manufacturing. You know, he is going down to the basics of it. He is asking, sir, how do you save machining time or save time in proving your machining aerospace components for the first time?
Yeah, so there are 3 aspects I will say that. As I said, first, in aerospace, the materials are different. I mean, they are not the run-of-the-mill materials. Like we use a lot of titanium, Inconel, stellite, and all those exotic alloys, where normally you will not get many of the standard cutting tools or properties available. So I think study metallurgy of this, which is lagging in like Russia, is very strong in understanding the metallurgy, and they know how to really work on each of these materials. So we focused on the metallurgy. So first, understand that material well. What is that we are going to do it? The second important part is the tolerances, and we always take a tolerancing stacking. That means final tolerance cannot be achieved on the machine unless and until you really have a tolerance stacking. That means you will be having some error in your calibration of machines, calibration of your instruments, the machine calibration, the instrument calibration can be different. So you have to keep on making provisions at every level. The beautiful part today is that many of these the cutting tool manufacturers, they offer you some kind of a software by which you can simulate and understand what is going to be the locked up stresses, because these materials and the requirement of everything to be a very lightweight, being everything is going to fly. uh, unwanted material is removed, and when you remove unwanted material, you are likely to put in stresses in these materials. So because of the stresses, there could be a distortions and deviations in the dimensions once you take out component from the machine and do it in a free condition. So these softwares are used for simulation. And the third is all this work what you are doing it, and when you are actually going to get the first component, create your own data bank, a knowledge management software, because that is something which is your own property. Nobody else will be able to give it, and use it next time when you are going to produce a component. And with these three things or the four things what we have done it, we are quite successful now today. Our first part inspection or the first pass yield has improved quite substantially. We used to be somewhere between 60-65% about 10 years back. Today we have crossed 95%, and we are aiming that in the next 1 or 2 years we should be as close as 99%.
That was absolutely masterclass, your answer.
Thank you.
Although you made it sound very easy and something that is business as usual for you, but there is a lot of experience and expertise that has gone into it. We are almost at the end of the session, Mr. Vaidya, and I want to end it with a very personal question.
Yeah.
When you started your career as a manufacturing professional, did you intend to be a professional who would grow into the aerospace and defense segment?
No, it was by accident. I mean, I actually joined or I completed my metallurgy, and my original wish was to be a mechanical engineer. Somehow I couldn't score the kind of marks or the grade which was required. So in IIT I could get it only into the metallurgy. But then I found that metallurgy can also get into the mechanical part, and then I started entering into the fabrication area through welding. So I am actually an expert welder. I am actually an expert welding engineer. But now I have learned, as you saw, that I could explain you quite well in the machining side also. So it is the accident when I was actually joined Godrej. It was into oil and petrochemical industry, the pressure vessels, heat exchangers. That's the group which I joined it. And in the 85s only we got involved with the Indian space program. And since the ISRO's first message was that all these alloys are going to be a new alloys, so you must have at least one metallurgist in your team, and that's how I got inducted into a small core group of 5 which was created in 85 to start working on the Indian space program. And then once I got into the Indian space program, I was very thrilled. I never looked back, and then every opportunity which came, I started taking it. And today we have really created a team of more than 800 employees in this aerospace, and we have 3 verticals serving the defense, the space, civil aviation, and all the offsets. And we have about 120 supply partners, and it's an ecosystem of more than 1,000 families which are now dependent on the initiatives what we have taken.
Okay, so to end the session, would you say these are really exciting times for professionals like you and the new blood that is getting into the system now?
Yeah, so every 10 years, as I said, was an exciting time because we saw some change, but nothing like this. I mean, today I really see that I should have been younger by at least 30 years. I would have done much more than I could do it. I'm still going to do it, but I don't have that kind of energy what was available with me 30 years back. But I think my team is there who will really take it forward.
No, you are being very modest, Mr. Vaidya. The kind of energy that you have exhibited on this session is simply amazing. So, Mr. Vaidya, thank you for joining us today. It was a privilege having you with us for this show. Thank you so much, and please don't go away. I would like to call upon my colleague Rishi. Rishi is the brand publisher for our magazine. Rishi, please join us and carry on with your vote of thanks. Probably you would also want to thank Mr. Vaidya for his role in this event.
Thank you, Niranjan. Thank you, Mr. Vaidya. I think it was a very insightful session, and I'm sure there are a lot of actionable points which our listeners, our attendees, our partners will be able to take away from this session. Very interesting. I was just looking at the theme of this event, Atmanirbhar Bharat, and it was launched by our Honorable Prime Minister in the month of May. 12th May was the day. short span of 6 months. Here we are together talking about this growing industry, putting it together, getting people to partner with us and showcase their products on this platform. So a few points which I have noted in the last 2 days, skill development, which is very important.